Hi everybody, today we're going to take a look at graphing piecewise functions in Desmos. There are two choices of how to do this. You can make a graph with multiple pieces. That will require putting the restriction that goes along with each piece of the function. Or you can make one function, which I think is the better choice. So I'm just going to step you through how to graph f of x as x plus 2 when x is less than 3, 4 when x is greater than or equal to 3 and less than or equal to 5, or 6 when x is greater than 5. And our first graph shows us this function when I graph it in pieces. So you can see I did f of x is x plus 2, and then I put in brackets x is less than 3. The second line I did g of x is 4, then in brackets I have x is greater than or equal to 3, less than or equal to 5, and then the last one says h of x is 6 when x is greater than 5. When you do multiple pieces, you need to label them as different things. You can't call each piece f, that gets confusing to Desmos. Here, if I want to evaluate the function at any particular number, I would have to make sure I used f, g, or h appropriately. So what I want to do instead is switch over to the graph in a singular function. So in the second version of this piecewise function, you can see I only have one function, f of x. The whole thing is in brackets, and it starts with the condition that x is less than 3, then there's a colon that says x plus 2. Then I have a comma with my next condition of x greater than or equal to 3 and less than or equal to 5, and that says 4, and then I have a comma that is 6, and we'll talk about those pieces in a minute. But now I have this one total function, so if I wanted to go in and evaluate, let's say we did f of 7, it tells me 6, or I can do f of negative 3, and it tells me negative 1. So I don't have to think about which piece it belongs to, and I can do the function evaluation. So the format that you need to use when you put in a piecewise function in Desmos is you start with the name of the function, you give your condition with a colon and then an expression, then your next condition with a colon at the expression, and you continue that way until you get to the end. You can choose to do the last one as an else, which is kind of like otherwise this is what you use. I want to point out a few things that are really important. Make sure you use the colon between the condition and the expression, and then we use a comma between the pieces of the function. I also think you need to be really careful with the otherwise because you need to make sure that it fits with the function that you're graphing. If your function has a restricted domain, the otherwise expression might give you an incorrect graph and might otherwise go on both sides of the graph or fill in parts that really weren't defined in your function, so be careful with that piece. As an example, say we had f of x is 2x when x is greater than or equal to 0 but less than 4, and is 4 minus a half of x when x is greater than or equal to 4 and less than or equal to 8. If we were to graph that in Desmos, we would type in f of x equals bracket. We start with our condition of 0 less than or equal to x, which is less than 4, colon, 2x, then we put in a comma. If I try to get Desmos to just do otherwise for the second half of the function, I would type in 4 minus a half of x. And notice that this puts in more than I want. I only want the answer to go where x is greater than or equal to 4 and less than or equal to 8, and I can see in the graph that this also gives me part of the function where x is less than 0. So to fix it, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the second expression, and I'll put in 4 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 8 with the colon. And then we can see it takes away the part where x was less than 0, and I have the two pieces that I'm supposed to for my function. This again would allow me to evaluate the function at any point I want within the domain, so I could put in f of 2 or f of 7. But if I try something like f of 10, it'll say undefined because it doesn't fit into the domain of the function.